Hello, and welcome to the Autistic Me podcast. I am Christopher Scott Wyatt, speaking as the Autistic Me. As a parent, I often remind healthcare providers and educators they should listen to what my daughters are telling them. Children's voices are rarely heard when discussing healthcare experiences. Mayo Clinic Press has brought together Mayo Clinic physicians, young patients, and author-illustrator Heineken to collaborate on the new series, My Life Beyond. Titles in this new series include My Life Beyond Diabetes, My Life Beyond Leukemia, My Life Beyond Bullying, and My Life Beyond Autism. My Life Beyond Autism draws from the imagination and experiences of 13-year-old Ciano, a Mayo Clinic patient. Heineken is Guillaume Federighi, an award-winning French-American artist and illustrator based in New York. He is the owner and creative director of Heineken Studio. His long list of clients includes Perrier, Heineken, BP, Keller Williams, and City and State Magazine. I will include links to Heineken Studio and his Instagram, Behance, Twitter, and all those wonderful resources in the show notes. It is an honor and privilege to welcome G to the podcast.
Hey, hi. Thanks for having me.
I am really honored to have you. My daughters and I sat down with My Life Beyond Autism. We did receive a review copy and we sat down and looked at it, and my daughters were just thrilled. This is a beautiful work of art that tells the story from a child's perspective. Can you tell the audience what attracted you to this Mayo Clinic project and the books you're working on?
Yes, absolutely. Actually, this was started in France with a Fondation Ibsen that I think came out with the concept. It was a collaboration with Mayo Clinic, and they had the whole idea of having those books as kind of a guide and platform that could help the dialogue between patients, parents, physicians for sometimes some topics that are very, very specific, and that sometimes also the children can always articulate exactly what they feel or what they experience. So they wanted to have those books made to facilitate and illustrate the topics that would help for that, if that makes sense. And so I was contacted by Ibsen and Mayo Clinic to help them with this. They were looking for someone who can as well illustrate and do the storytelling by collecting all the experiences from different children for certain topics.
You've obviously worked with a lot of major clients. So what attracted you to this project, which is obviously a work of passion?
Yeah, it is. I hope these books will change the world. I hope this book will help kids and people in general. And I think to me, it's just a beautiful project just for that.
What we noticed when we were looking at the book is it is from the child's perspective. So the My Life Beyond Autism, My Life Beyond Diabetes, these are books that are told very carefully from the child's perspective, not a medical perspective. So how did you go about working with the children on these projects?
So it's very a case-by-case situation. Every child is different, and what their experience is also different. That they went through is also different. The way that I'm gonna have the conversation with them to in order to create these stories, I want to make sure that that's their voices and that's their imagination. That I'm only here to help them translate that into these books, into a concept that's actually. We would meet a few times, and we would have multiple sessions. The first one is really just to know each other and me to know them. And then I would have usually I build a series of questions to understand. But by the answer they would give me, I would understand their personality. Most of the time, we connect on some very specific topics. It can go from what's your favorite color to favorite food to favorite superhero, and one of those will definitely connect us on something that's we both interested in. And then we have a good dialogue, and then we go into their backgrounds and experience, and then we start to build a setting, a character, and a plot. That's how we start.
There are 32 pages of illustration in each of these books.
Yes.
They are bright and vibrant. Can you tell me a little bit about your method? Because these are very unique. They're not in a comic book style, and they're not, in something that might be familiar to some of my listeners. These are a very clean, crisp, stylized art. So could you tell me a little bit about what you use to create these images?
Yeah, so first of all, I want the books to be, like you say, very clean, very, very, very clear. The illustrations are very, it's only a few elements per frames or pages to really go to the point. Because sometimes we're dealing with something that's all very complex. And to me, my work is to simplify all this complexity to make something that's appropriate for everyone, easy access to everyone. The color palette is something that we are deciding with the child. That would be part of the question of what's your favorite color, and then they usually pick a few colors, and then we would create a palette around that, or we create a palette around that. Because I would go into specifics of if one child says it's purple, I would ask if it's a darker purple, if it's a more dull purple, and then once I have that, then I have kind of like the tone set, and I can work my palette with it.
My Life Beyond Autism is a beautiful mix of oranges and blues, so lots of contrast. It has very minimal text. What my daughters and I liked about it, both of them were commenting on, even though there's little text, the pictures are so good at depicting things. For example, you have stages of life and you show a child, an adolescent, a teen, an older person. So you're illustrating concepts instead of relying on the language. It's a very visual series.
Yes.
And that makes it in some ways very approachable and very friendly for not just children, but also for parents who struggle with language to communicate. These are very, very visually rich in their communication. Can you talk about why that was important for you as a designer?
As a designer, but also working with Ciano, we realized that if an image without word was telling a story on its own, that would be working. I came up with a bullet points of ideas, experiences. I kind of almost created icons for each. So if only a simple image would tell a more complex idea, and Ciano would agree that that's right, then we know that we're on a good path, on a good direction. And then we would have had just some text just to amplify that idea, just to make sure there's this is exactly what we're seeing. So just it goes together to make sure there's no sidetrack or anything. If that makes sense, yeah.
Oh, yes. And as we were looking through these, the color palette's rich, the illustrations are simple, and there's something that an autistic preteen or teen can really relate to. I think that the stylistic choices, though, that because it's simple, because it's not overwhelming, that also works really well for this particular audience.
Yeah.
And you said you worked on this with Ciano, the autistic consultant for this particular book.
Exactly. So he came up with the character, Tracy, who's a young girl who has autism. And then the idea was to go through kind of a journey and make sure that we were covering specific points, specific experiences or things that he would experience again and again in his daily life and his daily routine, and his view as a children with autism, but also for anyone else and any readers could also understand what it is about. You wanted to make sure that you would change some of the stereotypes that some people might have around children with autism, and then you want to make sure that also he would say what he feel, what it actually is for him to be like that in a way. And that was very fun. It was very fun.
I am reminded of a series of books that came out probably in the 1980s and 90s. Totem Books did a series of illustrated guides to philosophy, religion, various thinkers. And I've used those in my classrooms. Sometimes the visual just really helps a young person see what's being written. There's a page here where it says, sometimes people look at me in a certain way. And it's just a hallway of very large heads. It brought to mind like Easter Island statues.
Yes.
Staring at this young woman with autism.
Yes.
Something like that is so powerful because the huge face is staring at you is so much more powerful than just the words. Sometimes people look at me.
Yes, that's what he said. That was his words, and I want to make sure that the image will be very clear and striking, and you can have the feeling of what it means when people are staring at you. You feel so small. Like this image is, Tracy is feeling so small, and people are overlooking at her and make her feel very, very small and lose her confidence also. And that was the idea of how to illustrate that specific image, specific idea.
One of the ways my daughter Lee really does communicate, the 9-year-old who is autistic with ADHD, is through her pictures, through her illustrations. And she does struggle to put words together. When we reach the point where the character Tracy, her speech is just squiggles. You have the speech balloons there, and it's some squiggles and dashes. And my daughter was like, I feel that way.
Oh, yeah, that's good. Okay.
And it's a speech bubble with no speech in it, just the symbols. And then after that talks about how Tracy is going to use images and creating films to communicate. I think that is really insightful because so many of the autistics I know, just from my work as a volunteer, from my daughters, they go to visual media, symbolic media to communicate. Does this also then come from what Ciano was telling you?
Absolutely. This is his main passion. He's really dedicated in this film. So he makes stop motion films made out of toys and on green screens. And he makes a lot of those. And we will meet every other week. He would come up with he would tell me about his latest one that he's working on, or one that he just pulled out. And he would have, and it's like, and I can see that he's so passionate, so focused on that, and also he wanted to, because he was really trying to share that all the time with us, me and Kim from Mayo Clinic, that we're doing the meetings, 3 of us every time. I was thinking that we should actually create, at the end of the book, there's a little step-by-step on how you make your own movie. And that can also, the idea was also to help maybe parents and children with disabilities, like autistic, can also maybe find a passion or find something to do together, inspired from Ciano's passion.
Now, there are several books already in the series. There are 3 currently in production, 3 more coming soon, and then another 3. So this is not a small project. This is a years-long project.
Yes, I think 3 books takes about a year. So we have 3 that came out already. We have leukemia, bullying, and autism, and then we have 3 months on in the pipeline, and then we have 3 more that we will start working on after March.
I know that you mentioned the foundation that is supporting this is in France. So are you doing these same books in other languages?
Yeah, they're translated for the US market, let's say in English, and then French. And I believe there's an idea that to translate to even more countries, for even more countries. So I think it's Spanish and more. I don't have the whole list, but yeah.
So this is a chance to reach that larger audience with these same illustrations, making the same points.
Yeah.
As I look through this, I'm thinking about the books you have coming up and available. The one on bullying, again, autistics, students with special needs, whether it's something physical like the leukemia, the diabetes, autism, ADHD, they often face bullying. So I could see the bullying book being almost essential for expressing what they endure. The podcast I'm editing right now, that'll come out probably before this episode, so if anyone's listening, you might look back. Gabby, the young woman with Down syndrome that I interviewed, she talked about bullying. Bullying, it shaped her view of the world, having been bullied. So many of the people I meet who have disabilities talk about how other people don't treat them well. So the bullying book, is that available now, or is that one of those coming out soon?
So this one was actually our first one. We started with bullying book. It's out, and it's true that the fact that we worked on this on the first kind of set some foundations for the others, and for me it's a reference. I go back to this book a lot when we're treating new topics.
It is essential for people to understand that the bullying issue is, like you said, it was the first book you did in this series. And that makes sense to me because it is so primary to the experiences of these children.
Yeah.
And too often it's dismissed. Oh, that's just kids being kids. Or are you sure you understood your classmates? Maybe they didn't mean it that way. Are you sure, she pushed you? When you sat down to work on that one first, did you know that you were moving towards this whole series and that shaped the bullying book?
We had the plan to work on the others, but we were also going with a bit of an unknown. It's really a unique project and a first one for me. And so working on the bullying built a good blueprint for sure for the others. But also, I realized that every books are so unique because every topics are very specific, and every kid, obviously, that I meet have their own experience and their background, and that's make them so unique, and also the interests. Some things can be sometimes they reused or because of reeling from the previous experience, but also realize that we have to treat them very uniquely, and even the styles changes. So, for example, bullying has a lot of frame into the page. It's very much more like a comic book in a way, versus the autism book is more as a graphic novel with very simple images per page. Because I think also that there was also something that I had in mind to make sure, like you said earlier, to help to facilitate the communication. And so this book can be something that we use as a parent or physician to explain a children what she's experiencing or he is experiencing now. But it can also be a physician explaining to the kid, this is what you might experience now. And by looking at this, so this becomes a bit of a platform for communication.
And I do want to point out to my listeners, some will be concerned about how this presents the medical aspects. The illustrated pages, those 32 pages, do not deal with what is or isn't the best therapy. They are not about the doctors. The 32 illustrated pages are Ciano working with you to create a child's perspective, a patient's perspective. It is not about curing autism, being over autism. Instead, this seems to be a really nice, this is who I am.
Exactly. Yes, that's exactly where it is. These books are really about collecting like you said, the child's perspective and explaining what it is about. So if it's what is bullying, what is leukemia, and what is autism, we're not here to give you a cure or anything, but we're here to witness something that we know through these experiences that kids have.
As someone who is diagnosed autistic and my children have gone through therapies and supports, I know that some other autistics and I will say certain therapies do and don't work. We don't necessarily endorse them, but I don't want people to say, oh, well, this book at the end has a reference list that includes ABA, or it has this reference or that reference. Quite honestly, we didn't even go into those with my daughters. We looked at the story that was being told. In some ways, it stands alone. Those reference pages at the end are just there. Mm-hmm. I'm sure some parents will want them, but it's the story that this is about. This is really about Tracy's story. This isn't about Tracy getting cured. This is about who Tracy is.
Yes, exactly. Mm-hmm.
As I said, the illustrations don't cover up the autism. You don't play it down. There's a point where talking about life with autism is complicated. It doesn't say it's going to get better or it's going to change. It just says it's complicated. It has this beautiful illustration of some trees and paths that looks like a maze. It's just beautifully illustrated, this concept of complication. It doesn't say my life's going to get easier. It just says, this is how it is.
This is how it is. Exactly. Yes.
So in a way, you're just, as you said, you're reporting and recording and transmitting what the children experience.
Yes, that's exactly what the book's about.
As an artist, I'm thinking of, in typography, Herman Zapf. I'm thinking of some of the more famous illustrators who have said that visual arts and typography, our job is to serve the message. Mm-hmm. So that's how you approach this. You were serving the message.
Exactly. Yes. That's exactly how I approach those books. I'm only here to serve, and I'm only here to help to produce a book from a child's story.
Gee, I do want to take these last few minutes to say I looked through your portfolio, and I hope listeners do too. It'll be in the list of show notes. They can go to HeyGee, it's HEYGEE.com, and they can look at your work. You have done a lot of commercial work, and it's very refined. It's very focused. It's just absolutely gorgeous. And it does impress me that someone with your portfolio took on this project. Did you have to be sold on this or convinced, or was this something when you were brought into this project, you said, I want to do this?
Absolutely. Yeah, that was my first reaction. I said, this is, I want to do this. As you said, commercial work is to sell a product. It's very different than here helping a community, trying to make the world a better place in a way, and not trying to help a corporation to sell a product. And even though I like both, they're both fine by me, because design is something that graphic design should be adapted for any purposes and any industry in a way. But and also because I just think that I learn a lot. It's a great experience for me to learn more about all these different topics that I wasn't really familiar with before, and also a way for me to work with children on children's book. And I always wanted to do that, and it's just a nice way to do it with collaborating with these children versus maybe me on my own creating my own stories. I like that a lot.
My daughter Lee had some questions, so I'm going to pass those along since she doesn't want to quite be on this episode.
Okay.
The first thing she wanted to know was, do you sketch the artwork on paper first?
I do, yes. I use a moleskin book for each one of them, and I would be a dedicated notebook for the specific story. And I would, after writing the plot, writing the whole story, I would then decompose it in like as a storyboard for animation, so I would decompose them, and then I would identify what should be a page, what should be a frame, and then I would actually by hand illustrate them all with I use pencil, mostly a brush, like ink, black ink, and then once I have my whole book sketched out, I then scan them, and then I rework them in Illustrator. I use Adobe Illustrator. That's my go-to software that I really like, and I have a tablet, and I really like. It's like, to me, using a vector is like sculpting something in a way. Also, it's easier for when you do a big project like that. It's easier. So if you have to make changes or adding something or taking out something, Illustrator helps for that. That's pretty much my process.
Lee has taken to a Wacom tablet.
Yeah, that's what I have.
Because she likes to draw with pencil, and so she can then make a layer of what we scan in for her, and then she traces it on the tablet to turn it into a vector image.
Yeah.
So she will be pleased to know that she's doing things right at the age of 9.
That's the right process, exactly.
You are doing something that I consider so essential. You are helping children communicate to adults.
I'm pleased. That's my pleasure. Thank you.
I thank you. My children thank you, because they enjoyed sharing the books with me. And I think that really shows what the books can do, is if they can get a child to say, hey, Dad, look at this. This is how I feel.
Exactly. Yes. That's the win. That's exactly that makes me so happy to hear this.
Thank you so much for joining the Autistic Me podcast for this episode. Those who are interested in the books or HeyGee's work, so G, you're, again, HeyGee.com. I'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah.
The books are going to be available from Mayo Clinic Press on Amazon and other retailers.
Yes, absolutely. Barnes and Nobles and a lot of different places. Mm-hmm.
And there's also a link at Mayo Clinic Press where they have the series under your name, and I'll put that link up too. And as you said, right now they're showing a few books, but there will be 9 books at least in the series.
Exactly, yeah, in the next coming year.
Well, congratulations on a wonderful work of art that has at least influenced my children and made them feel good. As a parent, that's really important to me, that I can share something and they can share it with me and it makes them feel good. So thank you, G, for what you are doing.
Well, thank you so much.